Working on a manga now for 2.5 years, or comic, however you want to call it. Just to clarify, I don't have 2.5 years worth of chapters saved up. Nah, it's just, well, you know. And this video was very tricky to think about and how I wanted to go about it, because I'm walking a fine line of trying to give as much practical advice that I've learned throughout this process without giving out too much about the story. So I should probably start at the beginning, or actually even before the beginning. I had a concept for a story that I came out with a few years ago. Not even going to mention it because it was absolute garbage. It was trash. If me now saw it back then, I would have told me in the past,
this nigga is trash.
Never write anything ever again. And even though it's embarrassing that I put that out publicly, I also think it's good now to be able to look back on it and look at it with such anger, because I think that's shown maturity since then and improvement. Fast forwarding some time later, and I'm playing Bloodborne, and through playing Bloodborne I fall in love with the experience and the music, especially, particularly Lawrence's theme. Now, just stick with me. When I fought Lawrence, I fell in love again with the music and the experience. However, I was violently furious with the fact that it was a fiery reskin of the Cleric Beast with the most garbage second phase in all of video. So my mind got to thinking, because I think Lawrence is an amazing character in Bloodborne and is super important to the lore of that game. But I couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. But like I said, I was in love with the theme. And listening to the theme over and over and over again, I thought, what would it be like if there was a Bloodborne-like story, but in a setting like Spain? But before we move any forward, I need to talk to y'all about Slickdeals. Slickdeals is a free browser extension. Just go to the link down in the description below and you should be completely set. With Slickdeals, you should be able to get the best possible prices when you shop online, and using the Slickdeals browser extension literally helps you see the best discounts at some of your favorite online retailers. With how prices are at the current moment, trust me, it's worth it. You don't even have to search for coupons. The browser extension applies the latest coupon codes to save you the most money on every single purchase when you go to checkout. And with the massive Slickdeals community of over 12 million users, they help share the most up-to-date information and help you get some of the best deals with coupon codes. And I mean, come on, who doesn't like saving money? Slickdeals is already the 8th largest shopping destination in the United States with over 1 billion visits annually. So they have more than a trustworthy reputation. So when it comes to shopping anything video game related, anything clothing related, I mean anything, Slickdeals has you covered. So make sure you download the free browser extension down in the description below and go shop on Slickdeals. A better way to shop online. And that's the not so amazing origin of the idea of Devoro, which is the name of the story, which I've been posting sneak peeks of on the community tab here on YouTube, as well as on Twitter and Instagram. Make sure you follow me there, where I will be announcing the chapter drop, so yeah. And so I had an idea, just like thousands, millions of other people with story ideas. But how would I go about developing this thing into something that I felt was something I was confident enough in to now be at the point where I am today? Now, this was the first thing I had to realize. Knowing what kind of stories you like and knowing how to write a story are two completely different things. And that was very humbling for me. I've been very critical on stories in the past, and I came to the realization that, with myself included, 99.9% of the anime community couldn't even come close to creating the stories that we often just seem to mop the floor with all the time. And I'm not saying that to say that criticism isn't valid from someone who doesn't write stories, because it is, just like we criticize athletes. All because we don't play the sport professionally ourselves doesn't mean we aren't in our right as the audience or consumer to criticize these things. I want y'all to criticize this story, and I hope I'm able to take those criticisms and improve. But if not, the point is, it's kind of like food. Knowing what food you like to eat is very different versus actually learning and knowing how to cook that food. I had no idea what I was doing for months when it came to creating this story. It's very different viewing a story from the perspective of the consumer or just the audience, like, yeah, I like this, I like that, versus viewing it from the perspective of someone who's writing a story and seeing how the author is constructing it. Because at the end of the day, stories are, and I heard this from somewhere, stories are or writing a story is sort of like a magician with an illusion. You're taking these artificial characters and artificial events and making them feel like actual characters that live in an actual world. I wasted so much time going in circles, and the story changed a lot over time in a good way. But the progress I could have made if I had taken some more practical steps that I will discuss in this video would have been great. And again, look, I'm no expert writer. This is just from the perspective of someone who's getting into this. The first piece of advice that I would give is write everything down. And this might sound like no duh, but seriously, it took me months to finally take everything that I was having in my brain and actually putting forth the effort to write it down, type it out. And once I started doing that, I started to really improve and go further with the story, because when you keep everything in your mind, even if you have a great memory and a great passion for your story, over time, those minor details will sort of fade out. And it's very important that you write this stuff down so you can look back on it and remember, because it's those minor details that matter a ton when it comes to whatever you're trying to do with character or with your story. So just write everything down. Get a journal, get a few journals. That helped me tremendously. Now, in terms of story writing tips, over the last year or so, I've been doing videos on how to write the perfect this, the perfect that, and those videos have not only been me expressing what I love about these characters, but also a way for me to research what authors actually do or try to do when it comes to writing certain character dynamics. And this has been me researching and quoting things from authors, looking at different discussions and interviews. So yeah, those videos weren't just for y'all, they were also for me to study and be able to understand the concepts enough to communicate them. Going back to something I said earlier about viewing things from the perspective of someone who's building something, being able to learn the very fundamentals of writing helps a lot. Things that authors do in common in order to make their stories more enjoyable. And in the end, you're going to create something that is born from the things that you enjoy and the inspirations you have. For example, one of the largest tips of advice that has helped me a lot in terms of the way that I've approached writing my story is the 2+2 rule. The 2+2 rule is one of the basic ideas of respecting your audience. You don't give them 4, you give them 2+2, and you allow them to reach 4. There's many different examples of stories doing this, but it's essentially not giving your audience the answer outright, not spoon-feeding them, but essentially giving them all the pieces they need to put it together and just come up with the answer for themselves. And that goes into every aspect of writing the story: major plot events, plot twists, character dialogue. Oh my goodness, dialogue. Dialogue is the hardest thing, because once you actually start writing the story down, then you have to go into actually writing scenes. And I kind of script out my scenes like if they were movies in a way, but obviously it's a little different because it's a comic, so I have to work with my artist and illustrating, and I'll get to the whole art thing in a bit. But essentially, when it comes to writing dialogue, there's actually a few things I want to discuss regarding that. Doing as much research on dialogue will only help you in the long run, and I would highly encourage it, as that's been something that I've been trying to do for the last few months, and it has helped tremendously. Dialogue, there's many different aspects that go into it, but one of the ones that was huge, for me at least, was the concept of subtext. Essentially, having a character say something whilst having an underlying meaning beneath what they say, and avoiding making dialogue too on the nose. Both of these things playing into the 2+2 rule. So if I could give a quick example of, or hopefully this is a good example, authors that have more experience, if you're watching this video, you can slam me in the comments. But essentially, if I have a character who's an introvert and doesn't like being around people, and I want to communicate this, say there's a scene where somebody goes up to him and is like, hey, you want to work with us on this group project? This character, if they said something like, no, I don't really like working with people, or I don't like people, you could do that. And then maybe if it's the character's personality to be direct and have no filter, it can work. But if the character is introverted or just isn't comfortable speaking with people, opening up, that's the character you're trying to create, it would feel a little weird if they said, no, I don't like working with people. It's too on the nose. It gives away too much about the character, and you're essentially spoon-feeding the audience, hey, this character doesn't like working with people. Instead, maybe just have the character say, no thank you, I'm fine. All the character is saying on the surface is, no thank you, I'm fine. But once you learn more about the character, what's underneath that is more so the feeling or the character simply not being comfortable with working with other people. And that concept of trying not to make dialogue too on the nose has helped a lot. This next thing with dialogue ties into, because it all ties together, this next thing kind of ties into your characters. Sort of knowing your own characters well enough to where you could put them in random scenarios and you would know kind of what they would say or how they would react. And that's really fleshing out your characters and their motives, their theme, everything about them, again, to the point to where you could just throw them in a bar fight or in a conflict and know how that would work. And the reason that ties into dialogue is because thinking about things such as the education level of your character, the emotional maturity of your character will affect the dialogue. For example, someone who's this high-class noble prince shouldn't be using the same vocabulary as a 90s gangster from Los Angeles.
Do me a favor, please. Get out of here. Get out of here, man. Shit, I'm saying.
They should not be talking the same at all. And again, these are basic things. These aren't super eye-revealing things from an expert author, because I'm not. But these are the basic fundamentals of constructing dialogue and constructing characters that has helped me a ton. Now, in terms of overall story, it's very important, and one of the pieces of advice that I was given that, again, helped me really bring the story all together is your story should have a purpose. It should have a theme. What is your story about? Every character in your story will have particular things about them where they might go off into different things. But in the end, all of these characters should sort of come around and centralize around this common theme. And it's important to keep this in mind, because if not, then your story can go in many different directions and the audience will pick up on it. And so what your characters do, what happens in the story, should all wrap around this theme in one way or another, or should at least go back to it. Again, a very simple concept, but this isn't something that I really thought about at the time when it came to creating the story. And it set me back a ton, because there were so many ideas I had that, yes, they were cool, but because I didn't have a real central theme to the story, it was a mess. Because there comes a point where once you have a theme realized, a central theme, and your characters thought out well enough to you know how they would react and how they would act, then there might be ideas that you have that are really, really cool, but they completely go against what the character is about and what the story is about. For example, if I have a character who I've established in the story is this morally great character, they are a hero. They are a hero in the fullest of the term. They are a Superman. And out of nowhere, they just wipe out 1 million people without any sort of legitimate justification, revelation, or development to that character, then it simply comes off as a cool moment that in the end has no substance, and anyone who respects my story enough will dislike that moment for completely going against the character I've established. Another really big piece of advice that I would give is just go out there and research as much as possible. Again, I'm someone who's learning, and I'm trying to learn. And there is so much information out there. And one of the things that I learned from watching the interviews of Alan Moore, the author behind Watchmen and many other brilliant works, has been to not only look at stories that you really do love and enjoy and great stories, but also look at some garbage. Look at bad stories and learn what not to do. Because sometimes, yeah, it's good to know what to do, but knowing what not to do is almost just as effective, if not twice as effective sometimes. There is no doubt that in my story, the Soulsborne series and Berserk have massive influence on it. But in the actual process of creating my own story, it was looking at the new Star Wars trilogy, or the most recent Star Wars trilogy, and seeing what I absolutely hated about those. And I was able to look at my own story and go, wait a minute, I'm going to end up doing the same thing. And again, this is just a subjective opinion on this series, but the amount of people I've seen legitimately bash on series like Naruto and Bleach, like if they were pure garbage, just really shows me that they have not gone and read really bad manga. Now, I know I haven't gone over the premise of the story or what's it about, and I don't want to just because but one of the things that I realized regarding my story was something regarding the protagonist and antagonist. Considering how much I praised dynamics like Tenma and Johan and Guts and Griffith, you would have thought the first thing that I would have thought of doing was writing a good protagonist-antagonist dynamic. But once again, knowing what I like and knowing how to create something of my own is very different. And I realized that I had an antagonist that was originally too distant from my protagonist. It was almost like, it felt artificial what my protagonist was doing. It was like, oh, they had to go do this and then that, simply because the plot demands it, not because it's genuinely the character's actions. And so, essentially, it's understanding that, at least for my story, me wanting to make it character-driven, is even though... crap, this is so hard because I can't get into, like, my actual character. Crap. I guess what I'm trying to say is when it comes to at least a character-driven story, and again, when it comes to the way you might script out a scene, is to view things as act and react. When it comes to the basic structure of a story arc, you have the expositional stage, which is where you're given the setting, the characters involved in the setting, and then there's something called the inciting incident. This is something that happens in the story that will prompt our main character to do something. And then you get the rising action, which is the main character's sort of reaction to the inciting incident, and that eventually leads into the climax, and then after the climax you have success or failure, and then you go down into the resolution stage, and then the next arc you start once again with the exposition stage. Berserk does this fantastic throughout all 5 arcs. I mean, you could look at all 5 arcs of Berserk and look at how they fit in perfectly to this very basic structure of story arcs. But what I'm trying to get at here is I was writing out scenes and I was planning out this story without an inciting incident and a rising action. It was the main character, well, they eventually went here, and then they went here. But a lot of the reasons as to why the character was doing it wasn't because anything was happening to them. There was no antagonistic force, really, pushing them to make decisions. And I felt like that was something that was very lacking and something that I really wanted to change. So I think sometimes viewing certain events or certain things that you want to do with your characters as things that will push them into making choices or to develop is important, because conflict is necessary for growth. Yeah, hopefully I've made that clear. Now going back to characters, when it comes to characters, and this is a personal thing, but lazy self-inserts are a bit of a yikes, especially for your main character. I don't know how far that will take you. From personal experience, not very far. But there will be pieces of you in every character. That's one thing I'll say about my story. Even some of the ugly aspects of these characters come from me. And it's important that even though a piece of you is in those characters are not you. They're each their own characters. And this goes back to what I said about distinguishing them with their dialogue and the way that they speak, their emotional maturity, finer details like that, and trying to do something with those characters that, again, just goes back into the story and benefits the story. And for me, it's become almost this unhealthy level of obsession to where even like 4-word sentences, I wonder, like, would this character even say this in this specific moment with this specific set of circumstances? And so I think it's very important, again, to just really try and get to know the in and outs of your character, their personality, their origin, their purpose in the story. There's a great video done by, I forget the name of the channel, but it was a video essentially, it was called like the Russian doll method, and it was a really good method in trying to realize and layer your characters in a way that sort of keeps things organized. Now, I can't really talk about the manga creating process if I don't now talk about the art aspect of it. And this is where I have to give a massive thanks to all of you. If it wasn't for the platform that I have now, I wouldn't have a platform to promote this story or to have the ability to have so many artists reach out to me when I asked for one. And the first artist I worked with was Mango Doodle. I'll link him down in the description below. But this story would not be what it is without him. And I feel genuinely terrible. Not because we ended off on bad terms. We're still very good friends. But he was such a great artist for how garbage of a writer I was at the time. And I still have so much more to improve in. But imagine working with someone who has no idea what the theme of their story is, has no idea of the basics when it comes to this, and y'all have been at it now for like 2 years. I still don't know how he put up with me. So much of what I'm saying now is stuff that I learned from him and observing his way of talking about the characters and advice that he would give me. On top of being an artist, I legitimately think he could create his own series, and it would dwarf so much of manga that come out nowadays. I'm not exaggerating. Like, if you put a gun to my head and I had to pick an artist to draw to save my life, he would probably be the first person to come to my mind. We both had very similar passions, desires, goals, and inspirations when it came to this story and what we wanted to do. And we both grew a lot, I think, from this process. And it was something to where, I mean, both of us were huge fans of, obviously, Berserk, Dark Souls. And another ginormous influence on this story, not only because I love the story, but he loves his works as well, is Nie, the author of Blam and Abara. And Mango really brought a lot of that influence in terms of the visual aspect of the story and how it was going to be communicated. And so that's something that I try to keep now working with my current artist, Muzzleton, who's another fantastic artist. Like, the fact that I lucked out twice is just insane. But there was a creative process that I had with my artist that, again, I was very blessed. And this is just something that helped me a lot, is it was never, okay, this is the idea I have for the story, shut up and draw. I wanted my artist to be just as involved in the creating of the narrative of this story as I was. I wanted it to be like we were almost two halves of the same brain. Because when it comes to manga, one of the great advantages of it is the ability to visually communicate something without the need for dialogue sometimes. And sometimes the imagery says so much more than what you ever could with words. And so if the artist is fully well aware of the characters that we're trying to create, of the purpose of the story, then we can create something that not only stands out from a written level, but from an artistic level. So once again, shout out to Mango Doodle and Muzzleton. Both of you have been so amazing to work with, and the amount of passion and effort that y'all have put in into helping me realize this story, I mean, it quite literally would not be here without these two. And even more importantly than that, I've been able to develop really amazing friendships with both of y'all. So shouts out again to Mango and Muzzleton. But yeah, the art aspect of the series is something that just goes into a stylistic choice. But Nie's works is a huge inspiration for the story. And even stuff like music, classical music, and I mean, Slipknot. When coming up with ideas for the story, I quite literally listened to the Dark Souls soundtracks, Dark Souls 3 specifically, Bloodborne, Slipknot. If you couldn't tell, the story's going to be a dark fantasy, maybe a little edgy, who knows. Again, though, I think the biggest piece of advice I could give is something I said earlier in the videos. Go out there and try and absorb as much information as possible. For me, though, that realization that I genuinely knew absolutely nothing when it came to creating a story is what helped me the most. And I hope I can continue to learn and improve, as I have a very long way to go. What I hope for this story, I don't really know. I hope it's something that I can look at and be proud of when it's all said and done. This will probably take the next 10 to 15 years of my life, and I'm very looking forward to it. This is something that I hope can be my transition and my primary focus, pushing YouTube to kind of a secondary thing, which is why I've started uploading once a week. that schedule will probably stay the same. And I hope it can be something that, you know, is another tribute and a testament to just how much of an impact and influence Berserk has been on dark fantasy and medieval stories. So, yeah, I'm a little nervous. I can't lie. I think it's going to be dropping in June, probably mid to late June. The first chapter is around like 60 pages. That's why it's been taking a while. But I hope any of the advice I've given in this video is encouraging, motivational, helpful in any sort of way. And I really hope y'all check it out when it drops. Again, I'll be leaving announcements on it on the community tab, on Instagram, on Twitter. And I'll probably make a video announcing that, hey, it's out, link in the description and all that. So yeah, if you are new to the channel though, like, comment, subscribe, turn on the bell notifications. This has been The Masked Man. Hope everyone has a blessed rest of the day, and peace.